Welcome everyone to BC's Offbeat Bass Gear. I am BC, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that was suggested to me by Lucas and Marten. Lucas and Marten run L&M Guitar Corner. They're YouTubers based in Austria. They have a super cool, super interesting, and super useful kind of guitar mods, guitar reviews, and general kind of gear-related fun stuff on their channel. I highly encourage you to check it out. I will put a link to it in the description for this video, and I hope you all take a look. So I was looking for a good topic for a video, and something that the boys at L&M suggested was to look at, if you were a guitar player and you wanted to get started recording your own bass and putting down your own bass tracks, what would you need bare minimum at kind of a basic cost to really get going? And I thought that was going to be a really interesting topic. I hope you find it as an interesting one as well. So let's launch into it. So first and foremost, obviously, the thing you're going to need to kick it off is a bass. And I think whether you're a first-time bass player or you're a guitar player that's just kind of looking to get into bass, you kind of naturally gravitate to the granddaddy of all basses, which is essentially this little number, the classic Fender P bass. Now, this one in particular is the 40th anniversary Squire by Fender. I bought this when Fender was blowing these out about a year ago on its website, and I think the great thing about the P bass is it is simplicity itself. You have a single tone control, a single volume control, a single split pickup, and that's pretty much it. This one is totally stock with the exception of this little finger ramp that I've added just to make it more comfortable to play. But it really is kind of the gold standard of rock bass sounds. Let's play it for a bit and see what we've got and kind of sample it. That's with the tone wide open. We roll the tone back and we get this really kind of very muffled. We can hit it with a pick either way. Mute it. Roll it back. And it basically does everything that a bass guitar is supposed to do. So, do I think this is a great selection for a guitar player who's just starting out? I think there's some real strong points to it. Number one, every manufacturer, just about everyone, makes some version of the P bass. You can get them from $200 up to $4,000. You are going to do just fine with the $200 range ones for what you want to use it for. However, I do think there's one drawback to the P bass, and that is when you're going to be moving from guitar to bass, you're going to be going from, whether it's Fender or Gibson scale, you're going to be moving to a 34-inch bass scale, long scale, which means you're going to have about 10 extra inches of real estate you're going to have to navigate on the fretboard. And the P bass has a pretty wide neck, even by the standards of a bass. So it's a good wide chunk of wood, even by bass standards. And I think that might be sort of the one drawback to a guitar player who's kind of getting into bass, is just that the P bass has a little wider neck. So I'm going to show you a couple of other options here that I think might be a little bit better, and they're all at roughly the same price point. So let's put down the P bass, and let's move over to the next kind of granddaddy of all bass designs, also from Fender, the Jazz bass. Now this one is mine. This looks a little unusual, I know. Did a video on this a few months ago. This one has an aluminum neck and a graphite fretboard, but in essence, this is a standard P bass. It has two single coil pickups, a master tone, and a volume control for each pickup, When both pickups are set to the same output, they have a hum canceling effect. And you can do a lot to sort of mix up the sounds here. Let's take it through two pickups wide open. If we roll back the bridge pickup to pretty much nothing, we've got a pretty good P bass type tone. We can roll the tone right off. Roll it off, bring up the bridge and get a real kind of tight, twangy, almost percussive tone. We'll hit it with a pick. And with the design of the jazz bass, you get a slightly thinner neck. And it doesn't seem, just when you look at it, or maybe when you first pick it up even, that makes a difference, but it really does. The more you play, especially if you're doubling bass parts and you know, adding bass parts to guitars, you're going to be down the bottom of the neck a great deal, and I think the slightly slimmer neck does make a big difference, actually. I'm going to go with one other option here I want to show you guys that I think is actually probably the best of all worlds if you're sort of looking for a good intro bass that can do pretty much everything. And it is kind of the best of both worlds. This is a PJ bass. So what we have here is a bass. This is the Michael Anthony signature from Yamaha from a few years ago. This is the lower end model. But essentially what you have is you have a jazz type pickup in the bridge, precision pickup in the neck, and essentially with the overwhelming majority of these, it's going to have sort of the jazz bass neck width and radius, so it's going to be a bit smaller. Now this one, instead of having the two volumes and the tone, this one has a 3-position selector. Same effect. You can go with just bridge only on this. And you can get a really good kind of twangy tone. I flip it all the way up to just the front pickup. Get a really good P bass tone. And hit it with a pick. I think if you're really able to do it, and the great thing is, just like the P bass and the jazz bass, these are kind of universally loved designs. Just about every manufacturer out there makes a PJ bass. You can get them for about the same price as a P bass or a jazz bass. The Squiers are great. Most manufacturers make pretty good ones. You can get these from $200 to $4,000. All you're going to be getting on the top end, better electronics, better woods, active pickups, EQ systems. For what you'd be doing as a guitar player, I think you'd be really well served with a PJ bass. They're hard to go wrong with. You can do a lot with them. The tone varies quite a bit on it, and they do a great job all around. I kind of have an honorable mention instrument I wanted to pull in here that comes up in these discussions with guitar players from time to time. It is this beauty, the Fender Bass 6. This is the Squier model. I did a video on this a few months ago. I really do like it. The thing I hear from guitar players quite often is the idea that, hey, okay, I play a 6-string guitar. The bass 6 is tuned the same way, E, B, G, D, A, E. It's just an octave lower. It should be a pretty easy transition for me. And I think that, you know, on the surface, that looks like a really good idea and a really good pick. I think when you really dig into it, you find that the bass 6 is a really specialized instrument. First of all, it's short scale, but it's still much longer than a guitar. So yeah, it's a little bit shorter. It's 30 inches versus 34. So it's a little bit shorter than a conventional bass, but it's still pretty long. You still have six very, very, very thick strings. They're much heavier than you get on a guitar. The string spacing is kind of a challenge. And the big advantage that you have is the higher range with the E and the B string that you get with a bass 6. If you're going to be putting bass parts on the guitar demos or just song demos, you're not going to be using the E and the B strings. You're not going to be playing sort of way up in the what's essentially the bass solo registers. You're going to be down G, D, A, E. You're going to be pretty much on your lowest 3 strings, moving around, probably not past the 7th fret. So whatever advantage this has tonally, you lose by having just the shorter scale, the crowding of the strings, and it's also a bit more expensive than any of these. So I really think, unless you're one of these players who, loves the offset body style design from Fender, that's what you play, that's what you love, that's what you're familiar with. Under those circumstances, maybe you would be okay with the bass 6, but I still think for most guitar players, the best bet's going to be a jazz bass or a PJ bass. So I really encourage you to look at those. Obviously, sit down in a shop somewhere and try all these out and just get a sense of what speaks to you. But like I said, I do think you'll find you'll be better served with the PJs and the jazz basses, or even the P bass, more than a bass 6, but it comes up a lot, so I thought I'd answer that question. Now, with regards to outboard gear and effects and the like, the great thing about bass is there really is not a ton of that going on. I'll take you through really just a couple of pieces of gear that I think add a lot. First and foremost, I think the thing you would benefit from the absolute most is this thing right here. It is a passive direct box. I bought this one decades ago when Mars Music was going out of business, and a direct box is worth its weight in gold. One like this, they're still being made. You can get one for 40 or 50 bucks from Guitar Center. Like anything else, there's very expensive ones. The radial ones go up to like $300 or $400 for their passive ones. You don't need anything that expensive. The way it works is this. You plug in your guitar to the instrument jack, and then you run a cord out into your amp or whatever you're using as your sound monitor. And in the back, you have a low Z output. So essentially what you do is you just get your ordinary conventional mic cable. Make sure you match that up. Lock it in. And then you can send it straight into the snake feed for a mixing board, direct into the mixing board itself, or into a computer interface like this PreSonus box. This one comes with a ground lift, which can solve a world of problems when you're dealing with bad shielding and getting hum, hiss, or anything else. This one also comes with a pad feature, which is essentially an attenuator that will allow you to sort of drop the boost back if you need to. These are incredibly useful little devices. They are very durable and they're very affordable. You don't need anything special. You can get one for 40 or 50 bucks. It is true that a lot of bass heads and some bass combos do come with a built-in balanced output, and I know a lot of people will use them. I'm always a little hesitant too, because oftentimes that's a piece of gear that's sort of wedged into the control cavity. That's something that's sort of not really thought of as first and foremost, and it's a pretty important part of the signal chain. Essentially what you end up with usually is just the XLR jack and maybe an output control, and some of them tend to be pretty noisy and pretty flimsy, so I think a dedicated one works a lot better. As far as effects go on bass, you really do not need a ton of effects on bass. I used to play with a little bit of chorus. We'll hear a little bit more of that later. Sometimes a little bit of fuzz, but really the one effect that a lot of bass players do use, and it's designed to basically give sort of an even level of response and attack across the spectrum of the instrument, is compression. Now, you really don't need anything fancy. In fact, I don't use compression. I use a parametric equalizer for the same reason. It's just what works better for me, but a lot of people use compression. This is a $30 Black Friday special from Amazon. A Joyo. This is the Dyna compressor. For some reason, it has a scorpion on the case. I don't know why, but hey, who doesn't like a good scorpion? It's very cheap and it works really well. If you have a pretty good pedal board, I'm sure you already have a compressor, that would work perfectly fine. Whatever recording software suite that you prefer to use, whatever compressors are in there, they will certainly work just fine. Back in the early days of DAWs, I remember like the gold standard was the Bomb Factory's slightly rude compression. It was pretty expensive, but it did a really good job. These days, every built-in compression is really just as good. So I think you can find something that works for you, and it's probably something you already have. Okay, having said that, that kind of brings us over to the last piece of gear, which is the amp. So the good news is, as far as a bass amp goes, you are fine with solid state. I know people love the sound of the Ampeg SVT and heads like that. They all love the sound of them. They don't like how heavy they are because they are ungodly heavy. Or even the smaller tube heads like the B15 Ampeg, that's the Portaflex, the convertible. Solid state is fine. I played my entire career using solid state heads and solid state gear, and I always was able to get a sound that mixed well, blended well, and still was really useful for me. The good thing is there's a million good bass combos out there. I'm not a big fan of the Fender Rumble series, but they're very well made and very well built. You'd be well served by them. This is an old 90s vintage PV Basic 60. I bought it used at Guitar Center for 150 bucks. It's a single 12. It works great. I think sort of the sweet spot you would be looking for, you'd be looking for a wattage rating of maybe 45 to 65, because typically you're going to need a little bit more than sort of the comparable guitar rating. And if you're going to be dealing with a small combo, maybe a 25 to 30 watt guitar amp, you're going to want maybe 45 to 65. You're moving a lot of air, relatively speaking, compared to guitar, to transmit those lower frequencies. You'd want a single 12. Two 10s would be ideal, maybe a single 15. You know, all of them would work. Most of the combos made today are really quite good. The only thing I would sort of warn you off of would be the in-house Guitar Center brand Acoustic. They bought the old name from the Acoustic 360 and 370 series from Acoustic Control. These are not the old acoustics. They're made to a very cheap price point. They don't project very well. The components are a little on the noisy side, and the speakers are just not up to snuff. I would suggest you looking elsewhere. With regards to digital modeling amps, I think that most of them that do have sort of a built-in bass suite do kind of a surprisingly good job, I think, overall. You can see next to me here I have the positive grid from Spark. This is the first Spark positive grid, not the one that's been introduced as its successor. It still has the original speakers in it, so keep that in mind. I'm going to do a video down the road where I replace the speakers and show how much of an improvement that makes to the bass sound. But these are the original speakers, and I'm just going to run it through a couple of the bass presets. First off, if you're not familiar with this or most of these modeling softwares, the modeling amps give you a whole menu of different bass settings. I think there's 8 or 9 on here, and they're not too bad. I sort of like Comped Cleaner is a good one. Punchy Chorus Bass I kind of like. Let's see, I call it Punchy Crunchy, and it actually mixes in a little bit of chorus, a little bit of compression as well. Let me play that, and you'll get a sense of what you can get from this. And I think you'll be kind of pleasantly surprised with how it sounds. So, one moment, and we'll give it a listen. That's just through the neck pickup. That is just through the middle pickup. Let's move back to one of the sort of This is the compressed clean. Another one I kind of like. Nothing fancy. Let's see here. What's another one? A real generic, very straight ahead one. They just call it SWR from the old SWR company. And there's really quite a lot to play with here. So basically, I really do encourage you to give these a try. They do a surprisingly good job. They can project surprisingly well when you're doing something, that doesn't require a ton of volume. And you have the added advantage of being able to take it direct into your recording interface. And there's a lot of value in that. Once you have it up on the screen, you can drop in and out anything you want, add, tweak to your heart's content, and it does a really good job, I think. So if you've got sort of a software suite that's got a bunch of bass presets with your digital amp, give them a try. I think you'll find that they work pretty well for you. So I hope you guys found this to be useful. I think if you're a guitar player and you really want to get into recording bass or just playing bass and doing some stuff live, I encourage you to do it after playing bass for 30 years and starting to get serious with guitar. I did notice that once I was digging deep into guitar, it improved my bass playing. It gave me a different perspective and made me approach things in a different way. And I hope it does the same thing for you too. I want to thank all of you for sitting here with me today and for watching this through to the end. If you have suggestions or comments, please put them in the space below. If you have any ideas on other gear you'd like me to take a look at, please throw that in there too. I encourage any and all comments, and I hope all of you have a great day. Stay safe, because I want to see you back again. This is BC from BC's Offbeat Bass Gear. Have a good day.